September morning, 1882. Three hired guns rode toward the isolated Montana homestead, grinning about the easiest $500 they'd ever make. Kill one widow, take her silver claim. Simple. What they didn't know, the golden-haired 28-year-old widow hanging laundry was Evangeline Eva Blackthorn, protégé of legendary Marshal Tobias McCrae, the fastest draw in 5 territories before his death. 3 killers, 3 seconds, 3 bodies before their guns cleared leather. This is the story of how underestimating a woman became the last mistake they ever made. 1882, Pine Ridge, Montana Territory, where silver brought fortune seekers and death followed close behind. The sun climbed over the Bitterroot Range that morning, painting the valley in shades of amber and gold. Pine Ridge sat nestled in a fold of land where the mountains met the prairie, a town of 312 souls clinging to civilization's edge. One main street, a general store, a saloon that doubled as the town hall, a church with a steeple that leaned slightly west as if the wind had been pushing it that direction for so long the woods simply gave up resisting. 2 miles outside town, where the road turned to little more than wagon ruts through tall grass, stood Eva Blackthorn's homestead. Timber cabin, stone chimney, a vegetable garden that showed the careful attention of someone who understood that survival on the frontier meant planning 6 months ahead. Split rail fence, water pump, a small barn that housed one mare, aging but reliable. Eva moved through her morning routine with the precision of ritual. 28 years old, though, the frontier had a way of adding years to a person's eyes even when their face stayed young. Golden hair usually braided and pinned, though this morning she'd let it hang loose while she worked. Blue-green eyes that seemed to shift color depending on the light. 5'6", slender in the way of women who worked hard and ate practical. She wore a simple calico dress, faded from washing work boots that had been resoled twice an apron, with pockets deep enough to hold clothespins and other necessities. To anyone watching, she appeared exactly what she claimed to be, a widow. Quiet, kept to herself mostly, tended her garden, mended clothes for a few town families to earn extra coins, showed up to church on Sundays, and sat in the back pew where she could leave quickly if the sermon ran long. 10 months since her husband Nathaniel died, they said. Mining accident, tragic. She'd taken it hard the way you'd expect. Stopped coming to town socials, sold off most of the livestock except the one horse. Liv simply spoke sparingly, and if there was something in her eyes that suggested depths nobody in Pine Ridge had ever explored well, frontier women often carried secrets. That was their right. Eva bent to her laundry basket, lifting a damp sheet. The morning air carried the scent of pine and sage and the distant promise of autumn. In another month, the first snows would come. She'd need to finish canning the last of the vegetables, chop more firewood, check the cabin roof for weak spots that might let winter through. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, pinning the sheet to the clothesline she'd strung between 2 posts. Ordinary movements. Domestic. The kind of thing a widow did on a Tuesday morning when the weather held fair and the work demanded doing. Except her eyes never stopped moving. She tracked a hawk circling overhead, calculating its hunting pattern. Noted the wind direction, steady from the northwest, which meant clear skies for at least another day. Cataloged the sounds around her. Birdsong, the creak of her fence where the wind worried at loose nails, her mare shifting in the barn content, and something else. Eva's hands stilled on the clothesline, though she didn't turn. Didn't change her expression. To anyone watching, she simply paused in her work, perhaps listening to the birds or lost in some private thought. But she was counting. Hoofbeats, 3 horses coming from the east at a steady canter. Still over a quarter mile out, maybe closer to 400 yards. Heavy riders from the depth of the sound carrying across the prairie. Not farmers on plow horses. Not ranchers checking fence lines. The rhythm wrong for casual travel. Men with purpose. Men who rode like they had somewhere specific to go. Ever reach for another sheet, her movements unhurried. Inside her chest, her heartbeat stayed steady. Tobias had trained that into her over 6 years. Panic is a choice, he'd said. Your body wants to run. Your mind knows better. Trust your mind. The hoofbeats grew louder. Eva pinned the corners of the sheet, taking her time. She bent to the basket again, selected a pillowcase, shook it out with a snap of fabric. Ordinary, normal. Just a widow doing her washing on a September morning. The riders came into view through a gap in her peripheral vision. 3 men, just as she'd counted. They slowed their horses to a walk as they approached her property line, taking their time now, looking the place over with the careful attention of men evaluating something they planned to take. Eva hung the pillowcase, reached for another. Her fingers found the familiar weave of cotton, but her mind was elsewhere, cataloging. Lead rider tall in the saddle. 35, maybe close to 40. Scar across his nose that pulled his lip into a permanent sneer. Dual revolvers worn low on his hips, tied down the way gunfighters preferred. Arrogance in the set of his shoulders. A man who'd killed before and expected to kill again without consequence. Second rider hanging back slightly. Older 40-something. Gaunt face eyes that never stopped moving. Rifle across his saddle hand resting too close to the trigger for casual riding. Silent type. The kind who watched and calculated and struck without warning. Third rider, youngest of the three. Late 20s, eager in the way of men trying to prove themselves. Shotgun in a boot holster. New spurs that jangled too loud, advertising his presence like a bell on a cat. Dangerous because he had something to prove, but sloppy because he hadn't learned subtlety yet. Eva's assessment took less than 3 seconds. Her hands never stopped moving through the laundry. Her expression never changed. But behind her eyes, calculations spun like clockwork. 3 armed men, coordinated approach. Confidence that suggested they'd done this before. Coming to an isolated homestead where a woman lived alone. The math wasn't complicated. They reined their horses at her fence line, 30 feet from where Eva stood at her clothesline. Close enough to intimidate. Far enough to draw if needed. The lead rider tipped his hat, a gesture of false courtesy that made Eva's skin crawl. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, voice smooth as creekstones. "Name's Colt Brennan. We're looking for the Blackthorn place." Eva continued, pinning clothes, didn't look up. "You found it. Is that right?" Colt leaned forward in his saddle leather creaking. "Then I expect you're the widow Blackthorn we heard about." "I expect I am." Eva shook out a shirt, examined a tear in the sleeve that would need mending. "Something I can help you gentlemen with, gentlemen." She used the word like a knife, letting just enough edge show to see if they'd notice. Colt smiled, not a pleasant expression. "That depends, ma'am. We've been riding most of the morning, come all the way from Butte. Heard there might be opportunity in these parts. Silver claims and such." "Mining office is in town," Eva said. 2 miles that direction." She gestured with the shirt, still not looking directly at them. "See, that's the thing." Colt dismounted, slow and deliberate. His boots hit the ground with solid thumps. "We heard your late husband, God rest him, filed a claim up in the North Canyon. Real promising vein from what folks say. Shame he passed before he could work it proper." Eva hung the shirt, reached for a pair of trousers. "My husband's affairs are my own business." "Course they are, ma'am, course they are." Colt took a step closer to the fence. "Thing is a woman alone, that's a hard situation. Working a claim, that's man's work. Heavy labor. Dangerous, too. Be a shame if something happened to you out there." The other 2 riders dismounted now, flanking their leader, creating a line, establishing position. Eva finally turned to face them, laundry forgotten. She stood with her back to the clothesline, hands empty at her sides, expression mild as milk. "That sounds almost like a threat, Mr. Brennan." Colt's smile widened. "Just concern, ma'am. Simple concern for your well-being." "How considerate." Eva's voice carried no inflection, flat as the prairie. "Though I wonder how you know so much about my husband's business, and why 3 armed men ride all the way from Butte to express concern for a widow they've never met." Silence settled over the yard. The wind pushed through the tall grass. Eva's mare nickered from the barn, sensing tension. The gaunt man spoke for the first time, his voice like gravel. "You're awful calm for a woman alone with 3 strangers." "Should I be frightened?" Eva tilted her head, genuinely curious. The young one laughed, a braying sound that held no humor. "Maybe you're too stupid to know when you're in danger." Eva's eyes shifted to him, and something in that look made his laughter die. "Or maybe," she said quietly, "I've seen enough danger to recognize the difference between threats and men playing at being dangerous." Colt's hand drifted toward his gun, a casual movement that fooled nobody. "Big words for someone in your position." "My position." Eva nodded slowly. "Let me make sure I understand. You 3 rode out here to kill me, take my claim, probably forge the deed transfer to make it look legal. You've likely got papers already prepared in your saddlebags. Payment arranged, maybe $500 each. And you think this will be easy because I'm just a widow alone and helpless." All 3 men froze. The accuracy of her assessment hit like a slap. Colt recovered first, but his smile had gone rigid. "Now what makes you think we'd do something like that? Because you're the 3rd group this year." Eva's voice never rose, never wavered. "Dalton's getting desperate." Pike, the young one, jerked like she'd struck him. "How do you know about Mr. Dalton?" "Pike, shut up," Colt snapped, but the damage was done. Eva nodded, pieces falling into place. "So it is Declan Dalton." I wondered. My husband died 10 months ago in what they called an accident. Convenient timing right after he filed that claim. Now Dalton sends hired guns to finish the job. She paused. I'm giving you one chance. Mount up, ride out, live. The gaunt man Wraith shifted his rifle. Or what? You'll what, exactly? Or I'll do what Tobias McCrae taught me. Eva's stance changed barely perceptible, but suddenly she looked different, balanced, ready. And men like you won't like how it ends. Colt's eyes narrowed. McCrae's dead. His student isn't. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. The moment stretched like pulled taffy tension building until something had to snap. Colt went for his gun. The next 3 seconds unfolded with a clarity that Eva would remember for the rest of her life. Not in real time. Slower. The way Tobias had taught her to see. Colt's hand moved toward his holster, confident, practiced. He'd done this before. Dozens of times. Maybe hundreds. His fingers knew the motion by instinct. Grip, draw, clear leather, aim, fire. Simple mechanics refined through repetition. But Eva was already moving. Her right hand blurred to her hip, where a Colt 45 hung in a holster hidden beneath her apron, custom-made to sit flat against her body, invisible until needed. Tobias had commissioned it from a leatherworker in Denver designed specifically for concealment. The gun itself was a work of art. Custom grip pearl inlaid, silver barrel with intricate scroll work, engraved along the cylinder in script, so fine you needed good light to read it. Mercy, she drew, 0.3 seconds from rest to fire. Tobias had drilled it into her until the motion became as natural as breathing. Thousands of hours of practice. Tens of thousands of rounds fired until her shoulder bore a permanent callus from the recoil, until she could draw and hit a playing card at 20 paces while blindfolded, guided only by sound and muscle memory. Her first shot caught Colt's revolver dead center, striking the cylinder with surgical precision. The gun exploded in his hand, not with the dramatic blast of a full powder charge, but with the sharp crack of metal shearing metal. His weapon spun away useless, the cylinder destroyed beyond repair. Colt screamed, clutching his hand. Not injured, not seriously, but shocked beyond comprehension. Eva's second shot came before Wraith could fully process what happened. His rifle, already rising, already aimed, met her bullet halfway. She hit the trigger mechanism, a target no bigger than a thumbnail at that distance. The rifle's hammer shattered. The weapon might as well have been a club. Wraith stared at his ruined gun, then at Eva, his gaunt face gone white. Pike fumbled for his shotgun hands, shaking movements, jerky with panic. He got it clear of the holster, swung it toward Eva with the desperate speed of a man who knew he was already too late. Eva's third shot punched through the shotgun's barrel 6 inches from the breech. At that angle with that placement, the weapon would explode if he tried to fire it. Probably wouldn't kill him. Probably would take his hands and face. Pike dropped the shotgun like it had turned to fire in his grip. Silence crashed down over the homestead. The entire sequence had taken less time than a full breath. 3 armed men, 3 destroyed weapons, not a single one of them had managed to fire a shot. Eva stood with her gun still raised steady, as stone smoke curling from the barrel. Her face showed no emotion, no satisfaction, no anger. Nothing but the cold calculation of someone who'd done exactly what she intended and achieved exactly the result she'd planned. Next 3 are through hearts, not hardware, she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. Your choice. Colt looked at his destroyed revolver, still smoking in the dirt where it had fallen. Looked at Eva. Looked at his 2 companions, both frozen, both clearly reassessing every decision that had led them to this moment. What are you, he whispered. The last lesson bad men learn. Eva's gun never wavered. Now ride! They ran, scrambled for their horses with the graceless panic of men who just felt death's cold breath on their necks. Mounted with fumbling hands, wheeled their animals around. Colt looked back, once his face a mask of disbelief and something that might have been the first stirrings of genuine fear. Dalton's going to hear about this. I'm counting on it, Eva said. They spurred their horses, hard racing back down the road toward Pine Ridge, leaving clouds of dust and abandoned weapons in their wake. Eva stood motionless until the hoofbeats faded. Then and only then did she lower her gun. She ejected the spent shells, 3 of them brass casings that clinked as they hit the ground. Reloaded with practiced efficiency from cartridges she kept in her apron pocket. 6 rounds in the cylinder. Safety protocols that Tobias had drilled into her until they became reflex. She holstered the weapon, adjusted her apron to conceal it again, and returned to her laundry as if nothing had happened. But her hands shook now, just slightly. The aftermath. The cost of controlled violence. Tobias had warned her about this too. You can train your body, he'd said, but you can't train your soul not to recognize what you've just done, even when it's necessary, especially when it's necessary. Eva forced her breathing to steady, counted to 10, then 20. The shaking subsided. She had work to finish. Laundry didn't hang itself, and in a few hours, probably less, those three men would reach Pine Ridge, would tell their story, would send word, and then things would get complicated. The morning aged toward noon. Eva finished her laundry, carried the empty basket inside, and set about the normal rhythms of homestead life. She fed her mare a bay named Temperance, who'd been with her since Wyoming, checked the chicken coop, collected 3 eggs, weeded a section of garden where wild turnips had tried to establish themselves. All the while, her mind worked. 3 hired guns meant Declan Dalton was serious. She'd suspected his involvement in Nathaniel's death from the beginning. The mine collapse had been too convenient, too clean. Nathaniel had been a careful man, an experienced mining engineer. He'd known how to shore up tunnels, how to read the rock and timber for signs of weakness, but he'd also been trusting. He'd believed that filing a legal claim would protect him, that the law meant something this far from civilization's center. Eva had known better even then. She'd tried to warn him, tried to explain that men like Dalton didn't respect claims or courts or any authority that couldn't be bought or intimidated. Nathaniel had smiled, kissed her forehead, told her she worried too much. The frontier was rough, yes, but it was also a place of new beginnings. Fresh starts. They'd work the claim together, build something real, maybe start a family. He'd been dead 3 weeks later. Eva knelt in her garden, pulling weeds with more force than necessary. 10 months. 10 months she'd played the grieving widow, maintaining the fiction, gathering information, learning about Dalton's operation, his network of corrupt officials, the pattern of claims that had ended in convenient accidents. She'd promised Tobias she'd leave this life behind, had sworn on his grave that she'd find peace, build something simple and good. But Nathaniel's death had changed the equation, not revenge. Eva understood the difference between justice and vengeance, understood it with the clarity that came from 6 years of learning at Tobias McCrae's side. Revenge was hot, reactive, personal. Justice was cold, calculated, systematic. Dalton needed to answer for what he'd done, not just to Nathaniel, to all of them. Every claim holder who died mysteriously, every family left destitute, every grave that marked another step in Declan Dalton's climb to power. Eva stood brushing dirt from her hands. The sun had passed its apex, early afternoon. Those 3 men would have reached Pine Ridge by now, would have told their story to whoever would listen. She needed to check on the town, see how the wind was blowing, prepare for whatever came next. Eva changed into her town dress, a gray cotton that was slightly less worn than her work clothes, pinned her hair up proper, checked her reflection in the small mirror above her wash basin. A widow, respectable, quiet. She left the Colt 45 in its hidden holster. Some things you didn't leave home without. The ride to Pine Ridge took 30 minutes at a steady walk. Eva let Temperance set the pace, using the time to think through contingencies. Best case, the 3 men had run and kept running, too embarrassed to admit they'd been bested by a woman. Unlikely but possible. More probable, they'd reached town in a panic, told some version of events that made them look less incompetent. Would claim she'd ambushed them, maybe. Had backup hidden, something to salvage their pride. Worst case, they'd sent word to Dalton immediately. In which case, Eva had maybe a day, 2 at most before things escalated. Pine Ridge came into view as she crested a low rise. The town looked peaceful in the afternoon light, lazy, a few people moving along the main street, horses tied at the saloon rail, smoke rising from the blacksmith's forge. Eva guided Temperance to the hitching post outside Hawthorne's general store. The proprietor, widow Abigail Hawthorne, was one of the few people in Pine Ridge that Eva considered something approaching a friend. Abigail was 52, had lost her husband to cholera during the war, and had a way of seeing people that suggested she'd learned to read truth beneath surface lies. The bell above the door chimed as Eva entered. The store smelled of coffee and leather and the sweet musk of dried apples. Abigail stood behind the counter, tallying inventory in a ledger, but she looked up as Eva approached. "Eva." Abigail's greeting carried warmth, but also something else. Concern, worry. "Wasn't expecting to see you today. Needed a few things." Eva kept her voice casual, glancing around the store. Empty except for the 2 of them. "Flour, coffee if you got any fresh roasted." "Course." Abigail moved to gather the items, but her movements seemed stiff, careful. You been out to your place all morning?" "Doing laundry." Eva watched the older woman's face. Why do you ask? Abigail set a cloth sack of flour on the counter with more force than necessary. Because 3 men came riding through here about an hour ago, looking like they'd seen the devil himself. One of them had a hand wrapped up, claimed he'd been attacked. Ava's expression didn't change. Attacked by who? That's the thing. Abigail leaned closer, lowering her voice even though they were alone. They wouldn't say. Not exactly. Just kept talking about a woman out at the Blackthorn place. Said she was dangerous, crazy, that she'd tried to kill them. That's quite an accusation. It is. Abigail held Ava's gaze. Thing is, I've known you near 2 years now. You've never been anything but quiet and respectful. But those men, Eva, they were terrified, truly terrified, and I know fear when I see it. Eva considered her response. Abigail deserved honesty, or as much of it as Eva could afford to give. 3 men came to my homestead this morning. They made threats, implied they were there on someone's orders to take my property. I defended myself. Defended yourself how? Efficiently. Abigail's eyes widened slightly. She started to speak, stopped, started again. Eva, those men were armed, professional guns by the look of them. How does a widow defend herself against that? By not being helpless. Eva met her eyes steadily. I'm not what I appear to be, Abigail. I never have been. But I'm not a danger to this town. You have my word on that. Before Abigail could respond, the door banged open. Deputy Ezra Holloway stumbled in, young and earnest and clearly agitated. 22 years old, tall and gangly, with sandy hair that never quite laid flat, and a badge that still shined from daily polishing. Mrs. Blackthorn. He touched his hat brim, a gesture of respect, so automatic it seemed unconscious. I need to ask you some questions. Questions about what, deputy? About an incident this morning. 3 men claim you attacked them, destroyed their property. One of them says you threatened to kill them. Eva kept her voice level. Did these men mention why they came to my property uninvited? What they said to me before I defended myself? Ezra shifted his weight, uncomfortable. They said they were just asking about mining claims. Said you flew into a rage. They're lying. Eva's tone stayed calm, factual. They came to kill me, to take my husband's claim. They were hired for that specific purpose. That's a serious accusation, ma'am. It's the truth. Can you prove it? Can they prove I attacked them without cause? Eva tilted her head. Deputy, did you examine these men? Were they injured? Ezra hesitated. Well, no, not exactly. One had some bruising on his hand, but no bullet wounds or nothing. Then how did I attack 3 armed men and leave them unharmed? They said you shot their guns out of their hands, that you're some kind of professional killer. Silence settled over the store. Abigail had gone very still behind the counter. Eva could feel the weight of both their stares. Did they mention, Eva said carefully, who sent them, who's paying them to harass widows and steal claims? Ezra's jaw tightened. They did mention a name, Declan Dalton, but that doesn't prove anything. Mr. Dalton is a respected businessman. Declan Dalton is a murderer. Eva's voice cut like glass. He's killed at least 15 people that I know of, made it look like accidents, mining collapses, fires, falls. My husband was one of them, and those 3 men this morning were sent to finish what he started. Mrs. Blackthorn, I can't just take your word for something like that. I'm not asking you to. Eva stepped closer, and something in her bearing made Ezra step back instinctively. I'm telling you to investigate. Look at the pattern. How many claim holders have died in the past 3 years? How many of those claims ended up in Dalton's hands? I'd need to check the records. Then check them. Eva's eyes held his. Because more men are coming, deputy. This won't stop with 3 hired guns. Dalton wants what I have and he won't quit until he gets it, or I'm dead. When that happens, I'd like to know if the law in this town plans to help or just look the other way. Ezra's face flushed. I don't look the other way, ma'am. I enforce the law. Then enforce it, or get out of my way and let me handle it myself. She turned and walked out, leaving the deputy standing in the middle of the store looking lost. Abigail followed her onto the porch. Eva, wait. Eva paused, one hand on Temperance's reins. Who are you? Abigail asked quietly. Really? Eva looked at the older woman for a long moment. Saw genuine concern there. Maybe even friendship. Someone who learned a long time ago that the world doesn't protect the weak. It just gives them a choice. Stay weak and hope for mercy, or get strong enough that mercy becomes irrelevant. That sounds like something a lawman would say. It's something a good lawman told me once. The best man I ever knew, Eva mounted Temperance. I'm sorry I can't tell you more, but I promise you, Abigail, everything I've done has been to protect myself and what's mine. Nothing more. And if more men come, then I'll do what's necessary. Eva gathered her reins, same as I did this morning. She rode out of town with the sun angling toward late afternoon. The confrontation with Ezra had been inevitable, but it complicated things. Word would spread now. The quiet widow wasn't so quiet, wasn't so helpless. That would reach Dalton's ears faster than anything. Eva made it halfway home before she saw the rider, a single figure on a dark horse approaching from the north at a hard gallop. Something about the way he sat the saddle, the urgency of his movement, set off alarms. She reined Temperance off the road into a copse of cottonwoods where she had cover and sightlines. Drew her Colt, held it low against her leg. The rider came closer. Young man, 20-something, bleeding from a wound on his leg. His horse was lathered, pushed too hard for too long. He saw Eva and turned toward her, desperate. Please, please, you have to help me. Eva stayed behind her, tree gun ready. Stop right there. Who are you? The man reined up hard enough that his horse nearly sat back on its haunches. My name's Frank Dalton. I'm Declan Dalton's younger brother. Please, I need to warn you. Every instinct, Eva had screamed trap. But the blood looked real. The fear in his eyes looked genuine. Warn me about what? About what's coming. Frank pressed a hand to his leg wound, trying to stanch the bleeding. My brother, he's sending 12 men, professional killers. They'll be here by tomorrow, maybe sooner. Why would you warn me you're his brother? I was his brother, Frank's voice cracked, until I saw what he did, what he's capable of. There was a town in Wyoming, Sweetwater. They wouldn't give up a witness my brother wanted dead. So he burned it. The whole town. 23 people died, including children. Eva felt ice settle in her stomach. 3 months ago, I tried to stop him. He had his men beat me, left me for dead. I've been hiding ever since. But I heard he sent men after you this morning. Heard they failed. So now he's coming himself with his best people. Why tell me this? Frank met her eyes. Because I can't stop him. I tried and failed. But maybe you can. I don't know who you are, lady, but anyone who can run off 3 of my brother's men with just a sidearm, maybe you got a chance. Eva studied him. The wound was real. His fear was real. But that didn't mean he was telling the truth. Could still be bait, a different kind of trap. But if he was telling the truth about Sweetwater, about 12 more men, then she needed every advantage she could get. Get down, she said, slowly. Frank dismounted, wincing. Eva kept her gun on him as she approached, examining the wound with quick efficiency. Through and through, high on the thigh, missed the artery, or he'd already be dead. Fresh, maybe an hour old. Who shot you? My brother, when I told him I wouldn't be part of this anymore. Frank's laugh held no humor. Guess blood really doesn't mean much when money's involved. Eva made a decision. Right or wrong, she'd know soon enough. Can you ride? Just did, didn't I? Then follow me. Stay where I can see you. If you make a move I don't like, I'll put you down without hesitation. Understood. Yes, ma'am. They rode to Eva's homestead, Frank trailing 20 yards behind Eva's hand, never far from her gun. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of crimson and gold. Beautiful, deceptive. At the cabin, Eva had Frank dismount and sit on her porch steps while she tended to his wound. She worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this before, many times. Cleaned the injury, bandaged it tight, gave him water and hardtack. Tell me about the 12 men, she said. Frank leaned back against the porch post, exhaustion written in every line of his body. Garrett Blackheart Stone leads them, former Confederate raider, burned homesteads all through Missouri, killed more than 40 men, and those are just the ones he bragged about. Eva nodded. She'd heard of Blackheart Stone. His reputation ran dark even by frontier standards. Who else? Dutch Hollis, explosives expert, cruel as they come. Maddox Crane bounty hunter who tracks like a bloodhound. The rest are just guns, but good ones. Men my brothers used before. When will they arrive? Tomorrow, maybe day after. Declan's gathering them in Butte. Once they're assembled, it's a hard day's ride to Pine Ridge. Eva stood, walked to the edge of her porch, looked out at the darkening prairie. 12 professional killers. Against one woman in a town that barely trusted her. The math was not encouraging. You should run, Frank said quietly. Take your horse, head for Canada. My brother will take the claim, but at least you'd be alive. Your brother already took something from me, Eva said. My husband, 10 months ago, a mining accident that wasn't an accident. Frank closed his eyes. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know until recently how many people he'd killed. But you know now? Yes. Then you're going to help me stop him. Frank's eyes snapped open. Help you, lady. I can barely ride. I'm not a gunfighter. I'm not anything. You're someone who knows your brother's methods, his tactics, the men he employs. Eva turned to face him. That makes you valuable. Question is, are you willing to use that knowledge to save lives? What lives? It's just you out here. For now, but if I run, your brother wins, and then what? He moves on to the next claim, the next victim. How many more Sweetwaters before someone stops him? Frank stared at her. You're serious. You actually think you can stand against 12 professional killers? No. Eva's smile held no warmth. I think we can. This town, these people. If we work together, if we're smart, if we prepare. They'll never fight. They're shopkeepers and farmers. They're people who've built something worth protecting. Sometimes that's enough. Eva extended her hand. So what's it going to be, Frank Dalton? You want to keep running from your brother? Or you want to help me end this? Frank looked at her hand for a long moment. Then slowly he reached out and shook it. I'll help. God help me, but I'll help. Though I think we're both going to die. Maybe, Eva said. But we'll die standing. That counts for something. She pulled him to his feet, helped him inside, set him up in the back room with blankets and instructions to rest. Then she stood alone in her cabin as night fell complete, looking at the items she'd kept hidden for 10 months. A badge. Silver star tarnished now. Deputy U.S. Marshal. Badge number 47. A journal. Leather-bound. Inside 31 names, 31 arrests, each one dated. Each one documented in her careful script. And a photograph, creased from being carried too long. A man in his 60s, iron gray hair, weathered face eyes that had seen too much but still managed kindness. Tobias McCrae standing beside a younger Eva the day she'd earned her badge. She traced the outline of his face with one finger. I'm sorry, Tobias, she whispered. I know I promised, but they won't let me keep it. So I'm breaking it. One last time, for Nathaniel, for Sweetwater, for everyone Dalton's hurt. The photograph didn't answer, couldn't answer. But Eva imagined she could hear his voice anyway, that gravel, rough drawl. Sometimes promises have to break so better ones can be kept. She set the photograph down, picked up the badge, pinned it inside her vest where no one could see, but she could feel its weight. Tomorrow would bring choices, hard ones, the kind that changed the shape of a person's life. But tonight, Eva Blackthorn allowed herself one quiet moment of grief for the peace she tried to build, and the man who taught her that peace without the strength to protect it was just a pretty lie waiting to shatter. Outside, the Montana wind picked up, singing through the eaves, carrying the scent of coming snow. Winter was coming early this year, and with it, a reckoning. Dawn broke cold over Pine Ridge, the kind of September morning that promised winter lurking just weeks away. Eva stood at her stove, heating coffee in a battered tin pot, watching steam curl toward the rafters. Behind her, Frank Dalton slept fitfully in the back room, fever making him mumble fragments of nightmares she didn't need to hear to understand. She'd been awake since before first light planning. 12 men, professional killers. They'd arrive tomorrow, maybe the day after. That gave her less than 48 hours to prepare a town that didn't trust her and probably wouldn't believe the threat, even if she explained it. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple. One woman, however skilled, could not defeat 12 trained gunmen in open combat. Not even Tobias at his prime could have managed those odds, which meant she needed to change the equation. Turn the fight into something other than a straight shootout. She needed allies. She needed terrain advantage. She needed the people of Pine Ridge to understand what was coming and choose to stand rather than scatter. Eva poured coffee into 2 tin cups, carried one to Frank's room. He was awake now, propped against the wall, his leg wound showing fresh seepage through the bandage. Needs changing, she said, setting the coffee beside him. I've had worse. Frank's voice came rough with pain and sleeplessness. Got shot in the shoulder, once had to dig the bullet out myself with a hunting knife. Stupid way to handle it, could have hit an artery. Wasn't exactly blessed with choices at the time. He sipped the coffee, made a face. Strong enough to strip paint. It'll wake you up. Eva knelt beside him, unwrapped the bandage with efficient movements. The wound looked better than she'd feared. Clean edges, no spreading infection. He'd live, assuming they both survived the next few days. Tell me about Sweetwater, she said while she worked. Everything. I need to understand how your brother operates. Frank's jaw tightened. You sure you want to hear this? I've heard worse. I doubt that. Try me. Frank closed his eyes. When he spoke, his voice had gone flat, the way people talked when describing horrors too big for emotion. There was a witness, Man named Caleb Waters. He'd seen Declan and his crew rob a mining office in Laramie. Killed the clerk, made it look like a claim dispute. But Waters saw them coming out, recognized Blackheart stone. Eva tied off the fresh bandage, sat back on her heels. And Waters went to Sweetwater. His sister lived there. Figured he'd be safe in a small town surrounded by family. Frank's laugh held broken glass. Declan sent 10 men, asked the town to hand Waters over. When they refused, he gave them 3 hours to reconsider. They didn't. No. The sheriff man named Pike Roberts, he stood on the steps of the town hall and told Declan that they protected their own, that the law would handle Waters if he'd broken it, but mob justice wasn't welcome. What happened to Sheriff Roberts? Declan shot him. Right there, center of town, then gave the order. Frank's hands trembled around the coffee cup. They had barrels of lamp oil, soaked every building on Main Street, set it all burning at once. The people they tried to run. Declan's men shot anyone who made it out. Men, women. Didn't matter. Eva's stomach went cold. The children, church basement, thought they'd be safe there. Frank opened his eyes and they were hollow. Fire doesn't care about sanctuary. 23 dead total. Waters and his whole family. That sheriff, a school teacher, 3 kids under the age of 10. Silence settled heavy between them. Eva stood and walked to the window, looked out at her homestead, bathed in morning light. Peaceful. Deceptive. You said you tried to stop him. I grabbed his arm when he gave the order to burn the church. Begged him. Told him they were just kids, they hadn't done anything. Frank's voice cracked. He looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Then he nodded to Blackheart stone. They beat me unconscious, left me in an alley. When I woke up, the whole town was ash. And you've been running since. What else could I do? Go to the law. Declan owns half the sheriffs between here and Denver. Federal marshals. They'd need evidence, witnesses. Everyone who could testify is dead or too scared to talk. Eva turned from the window. Not everyone. What do you mean? You're a witness. You saw what happened. You can testify. Frank barked a bitter laugh. His own brother, they'd never believe me. Say I was trying to save my own skin shift blame. Maybe, maybe not. Eva crossed her arms. But right now, you're the only person alive who can connect Declan Dalton directly to a massacre. That makes you valuable. It also makes you a threat he'll want eliminated. Which is why I suggested you run. We both run. Running just delays the problem. Eva moved to her table, spread out a hand-drawn map of Pine Ridge she'd sketched the night before. Your brother thinks I'm alone. Defenseless. He's sending 12 men to handle one widow. That tells me he's arrogant. Overconfident. He's also smart. Careful. He wouldn't have survived this long otherwise. Smart, yes, but he's made a mistake. Eva tapped the map. He's underestimating his enemy. Not the first time that's happened to me. Won't be the last. Frank struggled to his feet, limped over to examine the map. You're serious about fighting. You really think you can win? I think I can change the odds enough to matter. Eva pointed to various locations she'd marked. Pine Ridge has 312 people, maybe 80 able-bodied men. Not fighters, but farmers and merchants who know how to handle rifles. They hunt. They've dealt with wolves and the occasional hostile. They're not helpless. They're not gunslingers either. No. Which is why we don't fight like gunslingers. Eva's finger traced sightlines, choke points, defensive positions. We fight like people protecting their home. We use the terrain. We prepare. We make every advantage count. They'll never agree to it. You're asking shopkeepers to stand against professional killers. I'm asking them to protect their families, their town, everything they've built. Eva looked up, met his eyes. People will fight when they understand what they're fighting for. I just need to make them understand. Frank studied the map, then studied her. Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or the first stirring of belief. You've done this before, haven't you? This isn't just bravado. I've stood against worse odds. Doing what you said you were just a widow. Eva hesitated. Trust was a currency she rarely spent. But Frank had ridden here wounded, had warned her, had offered information that could save lives. He'd earned something. I was a deputy, she said finally. U.S. Marshal's office. 6 years. My mentor was a man named Tobias McCrae. Frank's eyes widened. Ironside McCrae. The marshal who cleared 3 territories. You've heard of him? Everyone's heard of him. He's a legend. Frank's gaze sharpened. Wait, McCrae died, 18 months ago? That's right. Shot in the back during an ambush. The words still hurt to say. I was on my honeymoon when it happened. By the time I got word he'd been buried 3 weeks, and you retired. I promised him I would. He made me swear that if anything happened to him, I'd hang up the badge. Find peace. Eva's smile held no warmth. I kept that promise for 10 months, built a quiet life with a good man. Then your brother killed my husband, and here we are. Frank sat down heavily in one of her kitchen chairs. So you're not just some widow who got lucky this morning. You're a trained federal lawman. Was. I haven't worn the badge in over a year. But the skills don't just disappear. No, they don't. Eva rolled up the map. Which is why I'm going into town this morning. I need to talk to people. Make them understand what's coming. They won't believe you. Why would they? Because I'm going to tell them the truth. All of it. Who I am, what I can do, what your brother did to Sweetwater. Eva strapped on her gun belt, no longer bothering to hide it under her apron. And then I'm going to give them a choice. Stand and fight or run, and hope Dalton's mercy catches up slower than his ambition. That's a hell of a speech. It's an honest one. Sometimes that's enough. She left Frank at the cabin with instructions to rest and stay alert. If anyone came who wasn't her, he was to hide in the root cellar and stay silent. He nodded agreement, but his eyes held doubt about whether any of this would work. Eva didn't blame him. She had doubts too. But doubt was just fear wearing a reasonable mask, and she'd learned long ago that fear made poor decisions. The ride into Pine Ridge took longer than usual. Eva let Temperance set an easy pace while her mind worked through approaches and arguments. She needed allies. Specifically, she needed the people who carried weight in town, the ones others listened to. Reverend Augustus Pine would be first. A man of God carried moral authority that even skeptics respected. If she could convince him, others might follow. The church sat at the north end of Main Street, white-painted boards weathered to gray in places where paint had flaked away. The steeple still leaned west, defying physics, and probably several building codes. Eva tied Temperance to the rail and climbed the 3 steps to the door. Inside, the church held the familiar smell of old wood and candle wax. Reverend Pine knelt at the altar, head bowed in prayer. He didn't turn at the sound of her entrance, but his voice carried clearly in the empty space. Mrs. Blackthorn, I wondered when you'd come. How did you know it was me? Your footsteps. He rose, turned to face her. 61 years old, with a face lined by weather and worry eyes that had seen the war and come home changed. Light, measured, the walk of someone who's learned to move quiet when needed. Eva stopped halfway down the aisle. You're observant. I'm old. There's a difference. Pine moved to the front pew, gestured for her to join him. I heard about yesterday. 3 men claiming you attacked them. Deputy Holloway asking questions. Now you're here wearing a gun openly for the first time since I've known you. Things are changing, Reverend. So it seems. He settled onto the hard wood, patted the space beside him. Sit. Tell an old man what's really happening. Eva sat, keeping space between them. How much do you know about Declan Dalton? Pine's expression darkened. Mining magnate, rich, connected, rumored to have questionable ethics, but nothing proven. He's a murderer, multiple times over. He killed my husband, made it look like an accident. Now he's sending men to kill me and take what's mine. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Eva pulled a folded paper from her pocket, handed it to him. This arrived yesterday, from Wyoming, a town called Sweetwater. Pine unfolded the letter, began reading. Eva watched his face change as the words registered. Horror, disbelief, grief. 23 people, he whispered. Children. Dalton burned them out when they wouldn't surrender a witness. His own brother saw it happen. That brother is at my cabin right now, wounded, terrified, but willing to testify if we can keep him alive long enough. Pine looked up from the letter. Why are you telling me this? Because 12 more of Dalton's men are coming. Tomorrow, maybe the day after. They're coming to finish what those 3 started yesterday. And when they get here, they won't stop with me. You think they'd hurt the town? I think Dalton doesn't leave witnesses. I think if Pine Ridge gets in his way, he'll do to us what he did to Sweetwater. Eva leaned forward. I can fight them. I have the skills, but not alone. I need help. I need this town to understand what's at stake and decide to stand. Pine set the letter down with trembling hands. Mrs. Blackthorn, what exactly are you asking? I'm asking you to call a town meeting. Tonight. Get everyone together. Let me explain the situation, then let them choose. Choose what? Fight or flee, stay and protect what's theirs, or abandon Pine Ridge and hope Dalton's satisfied with just taking what he wants. Eva held his gaze. There's no judgment either way, Reverend. Running might be the smart choice, but people deserve to know what's coming so they can decide for themselves. Pine walked to the altar, stood with his back to her for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old memories. I was a chaplain during the war. Union Army. I saw what happens when good people stand by while evil acts. I buried boys who died for the sin of being in the wrong place when powerful men decided violence was acceptable. He turned. I also saw what happens when communities rally, when ordinary people decide that some things are worth the cost of protecting. So you'll help. I'll call the meeting, 7 o'clock tonight. But Mrs. Blackthorn, I need you to be honest with me about one thing. What's that? Who are you really? Because the woman who handled 3 gunmen yesterday who talks about tactics and fighting odds, that's not a grieving widow who's been quietly tending a homestead. Eva stood. My name is Evangeline Eva McCrae Blackthorn. I was a deputy U.S. Marshal for 6 years. I served under Tobias McCrae. I have 31 arrests on my record, all of them clean, all of them justified. I retired when my mentor died, and I married Nathaniel Blackthorn. I came here seeking peace. And now I'm done running from what I am. Dalton made this personal when he killed Nathaniel. He made it about more than me when he burned Sweetwater. So I'm offering this town something I learned from the best lawman I ever knew. What's that? A choice to stand for something that matters. Pine studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. 7 o'clock. I'll have them there. They shook. His grip was firm, calloused from years of work that had nothing to do with prayer books. Eva left the church and moved to her next stop. Doc Thaddeus Morgan's office sat above the general store, accessed by an outside staircase that creaked under her boots. She found the doctor bent over his desk, updating patient records in precise script. He looked up as she entered, and his eyes went immediately to the gun on her hip. Mrs. Blackthorn, should I be concerned that you're armed? That depends on whether you're planning to shoot me, Doc. Morgan snorted. My shooting days ended at Antietam. Nowadays, I prefer to heal rather than harm. He set down his pen. Though I suspect you're here because someone's going to need healing soon. Probably. Eva closed the door behind her. I need your help. Medical help. The practical kind. There's going to be a town meeting tonight. Things are going to be said that will frighten people. Some of them might panic. I need someone with authority and a steady hand to help keep things calm. Morgan leaned back in his chair. What kind of things? Eva laid out the situation. Dalton, the 12 men, Sweetwater, Frank's testimony. The choice Pine Ridge would need to make. The doctor listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, processing. You're asking this town to go to war. I'm asking this town to defend itself. There's a difference. Is there? Morgan stood moved to his window that overlooked Main Street. War defense, it all ends the same way, with bodies on tables and me trying to put people back together. Would you rather put together the bodies of people who chose to fight or bury the ashes of people who didn't get a choice at all? Morgan's shoulders tightened. That's not fair. Fair went out the window when Dalton burned 23 people alive. Now there's just what is. Eva joined him at the window. I know what I'm asking. I know the cost. But I also know what happens if we don't stand. I've seen it. Sweetwater proved it. And if we fight and lose, then at least we tried. At least these people got to choose their end rather than have it chosen for them. Morgan turned from the window. You remind me of someone, a surgeon I knew during the war. He used to say that the worst wounds weren't the ones you could see. They were the ones that came from doing nothing when action was needed. Smart man. Dead man. Took a bullet trying to save a wounded soldier in no man's land. Morgan's expression softened slightly, but he wasn't wrong. I'll be at the meeting. I'll help keep heads cool, though I reserve the right to tell you this is insane. Duly noted. Eva made 3 more stops. Abigail Hawthorne at the general store, who's agreed to attend and bring the other merchants. A rancher named Josiah Pruitt, whose daughter Mercy was the child Eva had been teaching to read. And finally, reluctantly, Sheriff Briggs. She found Briggs in his office, feet up on his desk, working through a bottle of whiskey, even though the sun hadn't reached noon. Mrs. Blackthorn. He didn't bother standing. Come to confess to attacking those men yesterday. Come to warn you that 12 more are on their way. That got his attention. His feet came off the desk. What? Eva told him. Not everything. She left out Frank's presence, left out her full history. But she gave him enough. Dalton, the pattern of deaths, Sweetwater, the threat to Pine Ridge. Briggs listened, growing paler with each detail. When she finished, he reached for the whiskey bottle with shaking hands. This is too big. We need federal help. Marshals, cavalry. 3 days minimum for cavalry from Fort Benton. Federal marshals would take longer. We don't have that time. Then what are we supposed to do? Eva leaned forward. We're supposed to stand, protect our town, fight if necessary. Fight! Briggs laughed a hollow sound. We're shopkeepers and farmers. We can't fight professional killers. With the right preparation, yes you can. You're insane. Maybe, but I'm also the best chance this town has. Eva straightened. There's a meeting tonight. 7 o'clock at the church. Reverend Pine is calling it. I expect to see you there, Sheriff. Sober if possible. She left before he could respond. The day aged toward evening. Eva returned to her homestead, checked on Frank, who'd slept most of the afternoon, his fever finally breaking. She fed him soup, changed his bandage again, and laid out what was coming. Town meeting tonight. I'm going to tell them everything. They'll either stand with me or they won't. And if they won't, then you and I make our stand anyway. Eva cleaned her gun's methodical movements that came from years of routine. But I think they will. People surprise you when they're given a choice between courage and cowardice. Tobias McCrae teach you that. Every day for 6 years. Frank watched her work. What was he like, McCrae? Eva paused, considering. Hard, fair. He didn't suffer fools, but he'd give anyone a chance to prove they weren't one. He taught me that justice isn't about being the fastest or the strongest. It's about being willing to stand when others won't. Sounds like a good man. The best I ever knew. Eva holstered the clean weapon. He died protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I'm going to honor that, whatever it costs. They rode into town together as dust settled. Frank struggling to stay upright in the saddle, but refusing to be left behind. The church was already full when they arrived, every pew packed, people standing along the walls. The whole town had turned out. Eva helped Frank inside, got him seated in a back pew where he wouldn't be immediately noticed. Then she walked down the aisle toward the front, feeling 300 pairs of eyes tracking her movement. Reverend Pine stood at the pulpit. He raised his hands for quiet. Thank you all for coming. I know this is unusual, calling a meeting on short notice, but we face an unusual situation. Mrs. Blackthorn has information that affects us all. I ask that you hear her out before making judgments. He stepped aside. Eva took his place, looking out at the assembled faces. Fear there, suspicion, curiosity. She saw Abigail Hawthorne in the third row, her expression supportive. Doc Morgan standing against the side wall, arms crossed. Deputy Ezra near the door, young and uncertain. Sheriff Briggs conspicuously absent. Eva took a breath, then began. My name is Evangeline Eva McCrae Blackthorn. Most of you know me as Eva Blackthorn, the widow who's lived quietly outside town for 10 months. That's partially true, but it's not the whole truth. She unbuttoned her vest, revealed the tarnished silver badge pinned inside. I was a deputy U.S. Marshal. I served for 6 years under Marshal Tobias McCrae. During that time, I arrested 31 criminals, bank robbers, claim jumpers, murderers. I did my job according to the law, and I never once fired my weapon unless lives were at stake. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Eva waited for them to settle. 18 months ago, my mentor was killed in an ambush. I retired as he'd asked me to. I met a good man named Nathaniel Blackthorn. We married, moved here. I thought I could build a peaceful life. Her voice hardened. 10 months ago, my husband died in what was called a mining accident. It wasn't. He was murdered by a man named Declan Dalton, who wanted the silver claim Nathaniel had filed. Yesterday, Dalton sent 3 hired guns to my homestead to finish the job, to kill me and take what's mine. More murmurs, some disbelief, but people were listening. I sent those 3 men running, but they've reported back to Dalton, and now he's sending 12 more. Professional killers. Men who've murdered before and will murder again. Eva pulled the Sweetwater letter from her pocket, held it up. 3 months ago, these same men burned a town called Sweetwater, Wyoming. 23 people died, men, women, children as young as 6 years old. Dalton burned them because they refused to hand over a witness. She let that sink in. Those 12 men are coming here, tomorrow or the day after. When they arrive, they won't stop with me. They'll take this town apart looking for anyone who helped me, anyone who stood in their way. And based on what they did to Sweetwater, I believe they'll burn Pine Ridge to ash rather than leave witnesses. The church erupted. Shouts, questions, fear turning to panic. Reverend Pine stepped forward. Please, let her finish. Eva waited for quiet again. I'm not telling you this to frighten you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know what's coming, and you deserve a choice. She pulled out her hand-drawn map and folded it on the pulpit. We can fight. With preparation, with smart tactics, with everyone working together, We can defend this town. I know how. I've done it before, but it will be dangerous. Some of you might die." She looked up, met their eyes. "Or you can leave. Pack up your families. Head to Fort Benton or Helena or anywhere else. No shame in it. Survival is a valid choice." Silence now, heavy and profound. "But understand this. If you run, Dalton wins. He takes what he wants. And the next town, the next person who stands in his way, they'll face the same choice. Run or die, because that's what happens when evil goes unchallenged." Eva's voice dropped, but it carried to every corner of the church. Tobias McCrae taught me that the frontier doesn't civilize itself. It takes people willing to stand, willing to say that some things matter more than personal safety. That community, that justice, that protecting the innocent, those things are worth fighting for. She paused. "I'm going to fight, with or without you, because Dalton killed my husband, because he killed 23 people in Sweetwater, because if I don't stop him here, he'll just keep going, keep killing, keep destroying." Eva looked around the room. "But I'd rather not fight alone. So I'm asking you, stand with me, protect your homes, your families, everything you've built here, or leave and I'll understand. But make your choice knowing what it means for this town, for the next one, for every person Dalton hurts if we don't stop him here." She stepped back from the pulpit. The church sat in stunned silence for a long moment. Then Abigail Hawthorne stood. "I'm staying. This is my home. I won't let some murderer burn it down." Doc Morgan pushed off from the wall. "I'm staying. Someone's going to need a doctor when this is over." Deputy Ezra stepped forward. "I took an oath to protect this town. I'm staying." One by one, people stood. Not everyone, but enough. Farmers, merchants, the blacksmith, the saloon keeper. Josiah Pruitt with determination in his weathered face. Eva felt something loosen in her chest. Not hope exactly, but possibility. Reverend Pine raised his hands. "Then we have work to do. Mrs. Blackthorn, what do you need from us?" Eva returned to the pulpit, spread out her map. "Everything." The work began at dawn. Eva stood in the center of Main Street, directing people with the calm authority of someone who'd commanded before. 23 men had volunteered to fight. Another dozen agreed to support roles, hauling materials, preparing supplies, managing the evacuation of those who chose to leave. The women and children who stayed, 43 souls in total, were moved to the church basement. Reverend Pine had spent the night reinforcing the structure, bracing the doors, stockpiling water and medical supplies. It wouldn't withstand a sustained assault, but it would provide shelter if things went badly. Doc Morgan set up a field hospital in his office, laying out instruments with the grim efficiency of a man who'd done this before. Bandages, whiskey for sterilization and pain, needles and catgut for stitching, a bone saw that Eva hoped would stay unused. Deputy Ezra worked with 3 other men to fortify the general store, stacking flour sacks and feed bags to create improvised barriers. Rifle ports cut into the upper walls gave clear sightlines down Main Street. The building's stone foundation and thick timber walls made it the strongest defensive position in town. Eva moved between work sites, checking progress, offering corrections. She'd sketched detailed diagrams the night before, mapping fields of fire fallback positions, choke points where attackers could be funneled and contained. "Stack those barrels tighter," she called to a pair of farmers wrestling whiskey barrels into position. "Leave gaps and bullets will find them." The men adjusted, sweat already darkening their shirts despite the morning chill. Abigail Hawthorne approached carrying a ledger. "We've got 17 rifles among the fighters. Ammunition varies. Some have 50 rounds, some have less than 20. Eva nodded. "Put the men with more ammunition on the rooftops. They'll have clearer shots need to make them count. Those with less stay at ground level, only fire when targets are close." "What about shotguns?" "We've got 5. Inside buildings, close quarters. Shotguns are devastating at 10 feet, useless at 50. Abigail made notes. "You've thought of everything, haven't you?" "I've tried." Eva scanned the street, calculating angles and distances. "But plans fall apart the moment fighting starts. That's when training matters, whether people can think under pressure. And if they can't, then we improvise." Frank Dalton emerged from the boarding house, moving better today, his leg wound healing clean. He'd spent the previous evening sharing everything he knew about his brother's tactics, the men who'd be becoming their preferred methods of attack. He joined Eva, surveying their preparations. "You've turned this place into a fortress. A poor one, but better than nothing." Eva pointed to the church steeple. "Ezra will be up there with the best rifle we have. He's got the high ground, 360-degree visibility. He'll be our early warning. And when they come, we let them get close. Make them think we're unprepared. Then we hit them from multiple angles at once, concentrated fire, try to break their confidence before they can organize. Frank shook his head. You're talking about ambushing professional killers. I'm talking about survival. Eva's voice carried steel. Your brother expects one woman in a frightened town. We're going to show him something different. By noon, the basic fortifications were complete. Eva called the fighters together in front of the church, 23 men ranging from Deputy Ezra at 22 to old Josiah Pruitt pushing 70. They looked at her with expressions mixing determination and fear. Good. Fear kept you sharp. Overconfidence got you killed. Listen carefully, Eva said. Most of you have never been in a gunfight. That's fine. This isn't about being gunslingers. It's about being smart and disciplined. She gestured to the map she'd posted on the church wall. Declan Dalton will bring 12 men. They're professionals, fast, experienced. In a straight fight, they'd cut through us like wheat. So we don't give them a straight fight. Eva pointed to positions marked on the map. 6 of you on rooftops, general store, saloon, boarding house, church, blacksmith, livery stable. Your job isn't to be heroes. It's to make them keep their heads down, force them to find cover, slow their advance. She moved her finger to ground positions. 12 of you at street level, behind barricades and doorways, anywhere that gives cover and a clear shot. You fire in volleys, 3 men at a time, coordinated. That way someone's always loaded while others reload. What about the rest of us? Asked a farmer named Garrett. 5 of you are mobile reserve. You move where needed, plug gaps, support positions under pressure. You're my flexibility. Josiah Pruitt raised a gnarled hand. And what will you be doing, Mrs. Blackthorn? Hunting. Eva's smile held no warmth. Dalton's men will focus on the obvious threats. Rooftops, barricades. They won't expect someone moving through the fight hitting from unexpected angles. That'll be me. Sounds dangerous. It is, but so is everything we're doing. Eva's gaze swept across them. I won't lie to you. Some of us probably won't survive this, but dying defending your home is better than living on your knees. Tobias McCrae taught me that. I believe it. Question is, do you? Silence. Then Ezra stepped forward. We believe it, ma'am. Wouldn't be here otherwise. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the group. Eva nodded. Then let's make sure we're ready. They drilled through the afternoon. Fire sequences, reload protocols, communication signals. Whistle patterns for warnings, mirror flashes for enemy positions, hand signals for when noise would give them away. It was rough, unpolished. Half the men had never worked together before, struggled with timing and coordination. But they were trying, learning, and sometimes that was enough. As evening approached, a rider appeared on the eastern road, single horse moving fast. Deputy Ezra spotted him from the church steeple, sent down a whistle signal. Eva was beside the general store when the warning came. She moved to the edge of town, hand on her gun, watching the approaching rider. Not one of Dalton's men, too young, too nervous. A messenger maybe, or a scout. The rider reined up 30 feet from Eva, breathing hard. Kid couldn't be more than 19, dressed in town clothes, not gun leather. Message for Pine Ridge, he gasped out. From Declan Dalton. I'll take it. The kid fumbled in his saddlebag, pulled out a sealed envelope, threw it toward Eva rather than approaching closer. It landed in the dirt at her feet. He said to tell you he's coming tomorrow. High noon. And anyone who stands with the widow will burn with her. Eva picked up the envelope, broke the seal, read the contents. 3 sentences in bold script. Surrender Eva Blackthorn by noon tomorrow. Resist and Pine Ridge shares Sweetwater's fate. This is your only warning. She looked up at the messenger. You work for Dalton? No, ma'am. He paid me $5 to deliver this. I don't want no part of whatever's happening here. Smart boy. Ride back and tell him we received his message. And we'll see him at noon. The messenger didn't need more encouragement. He wheeled his horse and galloped away. Eva returned to town square where people had gathered, drawn by the commotion. She read Dalton's message aloud, her voice carrying clearly in the evening air. When she finished, uncertainty rippled through the crowd. Some had been confident earlier. Now faced with the reality of what was coming, doubt crept in. Sheriff Briggs pushed through from the back. He'd stayed drunk and absent most of the day. Now he stood swaying slightly, pointing an accusing finger at Eva. This is your fault, all of it. You brought this down on us. Dalton brought this down on you, Eva replied calmly. I'm just the excuse he's using. We should give you to him. Trade your life for the town's safety. You think he'd honor that after Sweetwater? Eva shook her head. He burns witnesses, Sheriff. Every person who's helped me, who knows what he's done, becomes a liability. Handing me over won't save you. It'll just make you defenseless when he comes anyway. She's right, Frank Dalton called out. He'd been sitting on the church steps, but now he stood limped forward. I'm Declan Dalton's brother. I've seen what he does. He doesn't leave witnesses ever. You give him Mrs. Blackthorn. He'll thank you kindly, then burn this town to make sure nobody talks. Briggs rounded on Frank. And we're supposed to believe you, his own brother. I've got a bullet wound from my brother to prove where my loyalties are. Frank pulled up his shirt, showed the bandaged leg. He shot me when I said I wouldn't help him anymore, after I saw what he did to Sweetwater. 23 people, Sheriff. 23, including kids. The crowd shifted uneasily. Reverend Pine stepped forward. We've made our choice. We stand and fight. Those of you who disagreed already left. The rest of us stay. You're all fools, Briggs spat. You'll die for nothing. Then we'll die free, Abigail Hawthorne said quietly. Better that than live as cowards who handed over an innocent woman to a murderer. Briggs looked around, saw no support, and stumbled away muttering curses. Eva waited until he was gone. Get some rest, all of you. Tomorrow comes early and you'll need clear heads. The crowd dispersed slowly. Eva watched them go, seeing the fear they carried, the uncertainty, but also something else. Determination, resolve. They'd stand. Whether they'd survive was another question. That night, Eva sat alone on the church steps, cleaning her gun by moonlight. The repetitive motion soothed her muscle memory from 1,000 similar nights during her years as a deputy. Footsteps approached, Doc Morgan carrying 2 tin cups. Figured you could use coffee, he said, settling beside her. Thanks. Eva took the cup, sipped. Strong and bitter the way she preferred. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the town settle into an uneasy sleep. I've been thinking, Morgan said finally, about what you said, about Tobias McCrae, about standing when others won't, and I think maybe that's what separates civilization from barbarism. Not laws or courts or fancy buildings, just people willing to stand. Eva considered that. Tobias would have agreed with you. What was he like? Harder than granite, kinder than most people who'd seen what he'd seen. He taught me that justice isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about protection, keeping the wolves away from the sheep. And you're doing that now, playing shepherd. I'm doing what I can. Eva set down her cup. But I won't lie to you, Doc. Tomorrow's going to be bad. 12 professional killers against 23 farmers and shopkeepers. The math isn't encouraging. But it's not impossible. No, not impossible. We've got surprise terrain advantage and motivation. They've got skill and experience. Eva's smile was grim. Question is, which factors matter more when bullets start flying? You really think we can win? I think we can survive. Make Dalton pay a price high enough that he decides Pine Ridge isn't worth it. Eva stood, holstered her gun. That's the best I can promise. Morgan stood as well. Then that'll have to be enough. He extended his hand. Whatever happens tomorrow, it's been an honor knowing you, Eva Blackthorn. They shook. His grip was steady. Honor's been mine, Doc. Eva made her rounds after Morgan left, checked defensive positions, spoke quietly with the men on watch, reassured where she could, corrected where needed. She found Ezra in the church steeple, sitting beside a Winchester rifle, staring out at the dark prairie. Nervous, she asked. Terrified, he admitted. I've never shot anyone before. Never even pointed a gun at a person. Good. That means you're not a killer by nature. Eva leaned against the wall beside him. But tomorrow you might have to become one. Can you do that? Ezra was quiet for a long moment. If it means protecting this town, yeah, I can do that. Then remember this. Hesitation gets you killed. When the time comes, don't think. Just act. Trust your training. What if I freeze? You won't. I've seen you work. You've got a steady hand and a good eye. You'll do fine. How can you be so sure? Because you're here, aren't you, sitting in a tower with a rifle waiting to face professional killers? That takes courage. And courage is what wins fights, not fancy gun work. Ezra looked at her. Were you scared your first time? Terrified. Tobias said that was normal. Said only fools and madmen feel no fear. Everyone else just learns to act despite it. Eva stood. Get some sleep. I'll take first watch. Yes, ma'am. Eva descended the steeple, continued her rounds. The town was quiet now, everyone settled into position or rest. She walked the perimeter, checking sight lines, making small adjustments. At the eastern edge of town, where the road stretched toward the prairie, she stopped. Tomorrow 12 men would come down that road. Killers. Men who'd murdered before and saw no reason to stop, but they'd be facing something they didn't expect. Not a frightened town ready to scatter, but people who'd chosen to stand, who'd decided that some things mattered more than safety. Eva touched the badge hidden beneath her vest, felt the weight of it, the responsibility. "I hope I'm doing this right, Tobias," she whispered to the night. "Hope I'm honoring what you taught me." The wind carried no answer, but she didn't need one. She knew what he'd say. "You're standing. That's what matters." Dawn came cold and clear. Eva woke from a brief sleep in the church basement, surrounded by women and children huddled together for warmth and comfort. Little Mercy Pruitt slept against her shoulder. Eva carefully extracted herself, settled the child against her mother. Outside, men were already at their positions. Silent, grim, ready. Eva moved through them, checking equipment, offering quiet words of encouragement. She found Frank on the church steps, staring east toward the rising sun. "How's the leg?" "Hurts, but I can move if needed." He looked at her. "This is really happening, isn't it?" "Yes. I keep thinking maybe Declan won't come. Maybe he'll decide it's not worth it. Your brother's proven he doesn't make those calculations." Eva sat beside him. "He'll come because his pride demands it, because letting one woman defy him sets a precedent he can't allow. Then we're going to fight my own brother. You don't have to be here for that. You can stay in the basement with the others." Frank shook his head. "No, I need to see this through. Need to stand against what he's become." He laughed bitterly. "Maybe that's the only way I can live with being his brother, by helping stop him." Eva nodded, understanding. They sat together as the sun climbed higher. 8 in the morning, 9, 10. At 11, Ezra's whistle pierced the air. 3 sharp blasts, enemy sighted. Eva was on her feet, instantly moving to the center of Main Street. Around her, men scrambled to positions they drilled 100 times. She pulled out her spyglass, trained it east. There, a line of riders, 12 of them, just as Frank had said, moving at a steady walk, confident, taking their time. Even at this distance, Eva could make out details. The lead rider sat tall, dressed in a gray coat that might have been Confederate officer's attire once. Garrett Blackheart Stone. Behind him, the others fanned out in a loose formation. They weren't trying to hide, weren't showing any concern. Just 12 men riding toward a town they expected to surrender. Eva lowered the spyglass, turned to the assembled defenders. "They're here. 12 riders coming straight down Main Street. They think we're going to fold. Show them different." Men nodded, checked their weapons one last time. "Remember the drill. Rooftop positions, fire first. Draw their attention up. Ground positions, wait for my signal. Don't waste ammunition. Every shot needs to count." She looked around at their faces. Fear there, yes, but also determination. Whatever happens today, you've already won. You chose to stand. That's what matters. Eva moved to her position behind the water trough near the general store. Drew her Colt, checked the cylinder one final time. 6 rounds, Mercy engraved along the barrel. The riders drew closer. 500 yards, 400, 300. At 200 yards, they stopped. Garrett Blackheart Stone rode forward alone, reining up in the middle of Main Street. He looked around at the barricades, the fortified buildings, the clearly prepared defenses. A slow smile spread across his weathered face. "Well now," he called out, voice carrying easily in the morning air. "Seems the little widow's got some spine after all." Eva stepped out from cover, stood in the street facing him, 30 yards between them. "Garrett Stone, I know your reputation. 40 men dead, homes burned, women and children murdered. 42, actually." Stone's smile widened. "You came prepared. I'm impressed. Turn around, right away. You and your men, last chance." Stone laughed, a sound like grinding gravel. "Or what, you'll shoot us. There's 12 of us and 1 of you." "There's more than me. Shopkeepers and farmers." Stone dismissed them with a wave. "They'll run the moment real lead starts flying." "Then you don't know much about people defending their homes." "I know enough." Stone's hand drifted toward his gun. "Mr. Dalton sends his regards. Says you got something belongs to him. Says we're to collect it, along with your body. Declan Dalton's a murderer and a coward, and you're just the dog he sends to do his killing." Stone's smile vanished. "Bold words for a dead woman." "I've been dead before. Didn't take." Ava's stance shifted, almost imperceptible, but suddenly she looked different. Dangerous. "Last warning, Stone. Turn around." "No." "Then we do this the hard way." Stone went for his gun. What happened next would be talked about in Pine Ridge for generations. Eva's draw was impossibly fast, the culmination of 6 years training under the best marshal the territories had ever known. Her hand blurred to her hip, cleared leather aimed and fired in one fluid motion that took less than half a second. Stone was fast too, a veteran of dozens of gunfights. His hand found his weapon, started the draw, but Eva fired first. Her bullet took him high in the shoulder, spinning him sideways in the saddle. His gun discharged harmlessly into the dirt. The sound of that single shot hung in the air for a frozen moment. Then all hell broke loose. The remaining 11 riders spurred forward with shouts of rage. Gunfire erupted from every direction as Pine Ridge's defenders opened up. Rifle shots from the rooftops, controlled volleys from the barricades. The careful discipline they drilled shattering into chaos as fear and adrenaline took over. But it worked. 2 of Dalton's men went down in the first volley, caught by concentrated fire before they could find cover. The others scattered, diving behind water troughs, scrambling into alleys, their confident advance disintegrating into desperate survival. Eva moved like smoke through the battle. She wasn't where defenders expected her, wasn't where attackers looked. She flowed between positions, appearing to take shots, vanishing before return fire could find her. A gunman named Dutch Hollis tried to flank the general store, rifle raised. Eva stepped from a doorway behind him, put a bullet through his gun hand. He dropped the weapon, turned to run. Ezra's shot from the steeple took him in the leg. He went down screaming. Maddox Crane, the tracker, tried to reach the church, made it to the steps before concentrated fire from 3 positions drove him back. He stumbled, crawled behind a horse trough. The battle raged for 10 minutes that felt like hours. Gunsmoke thick enough to taste. The crack of rifles, screams of wounded men, the smell of blood and fear. Then suddenly it was over. Of Dalton's 12 men, 6 were dead. 4 wounded and captured. 2 had fled during the chaos, riding hard back toward Butte. Pine Ridge's defenders had won, but the cost showed in Doc Morgan's grim face as he moved between the wounded. 3 of their own dead. 5 wounded. The town had blood on its streets and grief in its heart. Eva stood in the center of Main Street, gun still in hand, surveying the aftermath. Her white blouse was splattered with blood, though none of it was hers. Her hands shook slightly from the aftermath of combat, but her eyes were clear. Garrett Blackheart Stone lay on his back where he'd fallen from his horse, bleeding from the shoulder wound and a second shot that had caught him in the chest during the fighting. He'd live, but barely. Eva knelt beside him. "Where's Declan Dalton?" Stone coughed, blood on his lips. "Safe. Far from here. He sent you to die." "We all die sometime." Stone's smile was ghastly. "But you're something else. Never seen a woman draw that fast. My mentor was faster, but he's dead. I'm what's left." "Who was he?" "Tobias McCrae." Stone's eyes widened. "Ironside McCrae? He was your teacher for 6 years. Then I'll die proud. Took McCrae's student to put me down." Stone coughed again. "Do me one kindness." "What?" "Make it clean. Don't let me hang." Eva stood. "That's not my decision. You'll face trial, a jury, justice. Ain't no justice for men like me. Then you'll die knowing you got more mercy than you ever gave." Eva walked away, leaving him to Doc Morgan's care. She found Frank leaning against the church wall, pale but unharmed. "It's done," she said. "Is it Declan still out there?" "But his crew isn't. His reputation isn't. Word will spread. 12 professional guns couldn't take one small town. That'll hurt him more than losing the men." Frank nodded slowly. "What happens now? Now we bury our dead, tend our wounded, send word to the federal marshals about what happened here." Eva looked around at the damaged town, the exhausted defenders. "And we rebuild." The sun was setting when they gathered for the burials. 3 men who'd stood when others might have run, who'd died protecting their home. Reverend Pine spoke words over their graves, talked about courage and sacrifice and the price of civilization. Eva stood at the back listening, thinking about Tobias, about Nathaniel, about all the graves that marked the path between then and now. When it was done, when the last shovel of dirt had been packed down, Ezra approached her. "What will you do now, Mrs. Blackthorn?" Eva looked at the badge still pinned inside her vest, thought about the promise she'd made to Tobias, the promise she'd broken. But she'd made another promise too, to protect the innocent, to stand against evil. And that promise had mattered more. "I'm staying," she said. "Pine Ridge needs someone who can teach them to defend themselves. Make sure they're ready if trouble comes again." "You mean like a marshal?" "Like a teacher." Eva smiled slightly. "Though I suppose sometimes those are the same thing." She walked back to her homestead as night fell alone except for Temperance the mare. The cabin looked the same as always. peaceful, quiet. But she was different now, had become something other than the widow who'd hidden here, seeking peace. Eva lit a lamp set at her table, pulled out the photograph of Tobias, looked at his weathered face, his knowing eyes. I broke my promise, she said to the image, but I kept the one that mattered. I stood. I protected them, just like you taught me. She could almost hear his voice. Good girl. Knew you would. Eva pinned the deputy marshal badge to her vest, this time on the outside where everyone could see. Tomorrow she'd start teaching, showing Pine Ridge how to protect itself, building something that would last beyond her years. Tonight she allowed herself to grieve. For Tobias. For Nathaniel. For the peace she'd tried to find in the violence she'd been forced to embrace. But grief was just another form of love, and love Tobias had taught her was what made standing worthwhile. The lamp burned late into the Montana night, a small light against the darkness, steady and sure. Like the woman who kept it burning. Like the legacy that would never die.